chosen one. There is a kind of aging no one warned you about. Not the kind that shows on your skin or slows your step. The kind that happens when you wake up every morning feeling heavier than the day before, even though nothing went wrong. Your energy leaks. Your faith thins out. Your reflexes dull, not physical reflexes, but the inner ones. The speed at which your spirit responds to opportunity, to decision, to life itself. And you have blamed your circumstances. But circumstances are not the cause. The cause is something you have been leaning on, something you trusted, and it has been corroding you from the inside without making a sound. Stay with me here, because what I am about to say may contradict nearly everything the spiritual world has been feeding you for years, and that is precisely why it needs to be said. You are not tired because life is hard. Life has always been hard. You have handled hard before, and you handled it with sharpness, with speed, with a kind of inner fire that made people wonder where your strength came from. That version of you did not need a motivational video to get through Tuesday. That version made decisions before breakfast that others deliberated over for weeks. That version carried spiritual perception so acute it could read a room in seconds and sense danger before it had a name. So the question is not whether life is hard. The question is, what happened to the system that used to run inside you, the one that processed pain, efficiently recovered from setback quickly, and generated clarity even in fog? That system has not disappeared. It has been suppressed. And the thing suppressing it is not your enemy. It is your dependency. Here is what I mean. Your body replaces nearly every cell it carries over a 7 to 10 year span. Biologically, you are not the same person you were a decade ago. Your bones are new. Your skin is new. Your blood has been recycled thousands of times. There is a renewal mechanism built into the very fabric of your physical design, and it runs without your permission, without your awareness, without your effort. It simply operates. But here is the paradox that should disturb you. If the body is designed to renew itself continuously, why do so many people carry the same exhaustion, the same fear, the same spiritual heaviness, year after year after year? The cells change. The weight remains. Why? Because biological renewal is only one layer. There is a deeper system, a spiritual renewal mechanism that was installed in you before your first breath. And that system has been deactivated, not by trauma, not by sin, not by some cosmic punishment. It was deactivated by what you chose to depend on when the original fuel ran low. You replaced internal supply with external substitutes. And those substitutes kept you functional, but they quietly shut down the self-renewing architecture that was supposed to keep you sharp, clear, and spiritually young, regardless of what the calendar said. Psalm 103 says it directly. He satisfies your life with good things so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. Notice the language. It does not say he gives you a special day. It does not say he marks a date on the calendar where renewal drops from the sky. It says he satisfies your life process, not event, and the result is renewal, continuous, ongoing, built into the rhythm of how you live, not into the arrival of a single moment. The eagle does not renew itself by waiting. The eagle renews itself by climbing, ascending to altitudes where the pressure and the atmosphere strip away what is old and allow what is new to form. Renewal is not passive reception. It is active participation with a design that was already in motion before you knew to ask for it. This is what this message is about. Not a promise that everything changes on a specific date. not a prophecy that doors will fly open if you just believe hard enough. That theology has aged you more than any hardship ever could, and we will dissect exactly why in the moments ahead. What I am offering you instead is a diagnosis and a protocol. The diagnosis is this: your renewal system is intact but offline, and the thing keeping it offline is the very thing you have been trusting to sustain you. The protocol is what comes next: specific, measurable, executable within the next 42 hours. Not because that number carries magic, but because it is short enough to prevent your procrastination and long enough to produce the first evidence that the system is responding. The physician who designed you did not leave you without a manual. He left you without excuses. The manual has always been available. The protocols have always been accessible. What was missing was the willingness to stop depending on painkillers and start addressing the actual disease. And that willingness, if it is forming in you right now, even as a whisper, is the first signal that the system is not dead. It is dormant, and dormant is not the same as destroyed. Dormant means it is waiting for a specific input to reactivate. That input is not a date. It is not a prophecy from a stranger on the internet. It is a decision, yours. And it begins with seeing clearly what turned the system off in the first place. The thing that has been draining you is not what you expect. It is not the betrayal you survived 3 years ago. It is not the financial pressure that kept you awake last month. It is not even the people who underestimated you, though all of those left marks. The thing that aged you most is a belief you were taught to treat as sacred, a belief so deeply embedded in your spiritual identity that questioning it feels like questioning God Himself. And that belief is this: that your faithfulness is measured by your ability to sit still and wait for heaven to move on your behalf. You were told that waiting is worship, that patience equals trust, that the longer you endure without acting, the more righteous you become in the eyes of the one who watches. And so you waited, not strategically, not temporarily. You waited as a permanent state of existence. You woke up waiting. You went to sleep waiting. And every day that passed without the miracle, without the phone call, without the door swinging open, you explained it the same way: it is not yet my time. But here is what nobody told you while you were sitting in that theology. When a muscle is not used, it atrophies. When an organ stops receiving activation signals, it slows down and eventually begins to shut off functions it was designed to perform. This is not metaphor. This is how biological systems operate. Your body interprets prolonged inactivity not as rest, but as irrelevance. It reads stillness as a signal that certain capacities are no longer needed, and it begins reallocating resources away from them. Your spiritual system operates on the same principle. When your inner capacity for decision-making, for courage, for creative initiative sits unused season after season because you are waiting for permission from the sky, that capacity does not stay sharp. It dulls. Your intuition, which once cut through confusion like a scalpel, starts hesitating. Your ability to recognize opportunity, which once operated in real time, develops a delay. You did not lose these things because you sinned or because heaven withdrew them. You lost them because you stopped sending the signal that they were needed. You aged yourself through sacred inactivity, and the cruelest part is that you believed you were being obedient while it happened. There is a distinction that will restructure everything if you let it land. There is a difference between waiting on God and waiting for God. Waiting on God is what a surgeon does in an operating room, Hands active, eyes focused, every instrument prepared, moving with precision while trusting that the outcome belongs to a power greater than technique alone. Waiting for God is what a patient does under anesthesia, unconscious, immobile, completely dependent on someone else to perform every action. Both involve trust, but only one involves participation. And participation is not optional in the design you were given. The physician built you with hands that are meant to work, a mind that is meant to strategize, and a spirit that is meant to initiate, not after heaven moves, but as the very mechanism through which heaven moves. Your paralysis was never the assignment. Your paralysis was the misinterpretation of the assignment. Consider how many decisions you have postponed because you were waiting for a sign. How many opportunities passed through your peripheral vision while you sat still asking for confirmation that never needed to come because the confirmation was already inside you, buried under layers of theology that taught you to distrust your own discernment. The ancient scriptures never once praised a person for doing nothing. Every figure who received divine backing was already in motion when the backing arrived. David was already running toward the giant. Moses had already raised the staff. The woman with the issue of blood had already pushed through the crowd. Heaven responded to movement, not to immobility. And yet, here you are, trained by 1,000 well-meaning voices to believe that stillness is your highest spiritual posture. I am not telling you to abandon trust. I am telling you that trust without movement is not faith. It is a sedative, and you have been medicated by it long enough that the numbness now feels normal. But normal is not the same as healthy, and comfortable is not the same as aligned. The physician did not design you to be comfortable. He designed you to be operational. And operational means the system is running, not waiting for a date on the calendar to grant it permission to start. So, if waiting is not the answer, then what is the appointed time everyone keeps talking about? What is Kairos really? Because you have heard the word used 100 times, and every time it was attached to a future moment you could not control. But what if that was never what it meant? The word has been hijacked. Kairos, the Greek term for appointed time, the moment of divine convergence, has been stripped of its original architecture and turned into a marketing tool. Every month, a new voice online tells you that this is your Kairos season. That this Friday, this full moon, this particular date circled in red is when heaven will release what has been held back. And every month the date passes. Nothing shifts. And instead of questioning the theology, you question yourself. Maybe I did not believe hard enough. Maybe I missed it. Maybe next month. That cycle, hope, anticipation, disappointment, self-blame, repeat, is not faith. It is a subscription to spiritual dependency. And it has been aging you faster than any external hardship ever could, because at least hardship strengthens something. This cycle only depletes. Let me show you what Kairos actually meant before the internet got hold of it. In the original Greek framework, there were two words for time. Chronos referred to sequential time, the clock, the calendar, the measurable passage of hours and days. Kairos referred to something entirely different. It described the moment when conditions reach a threshold of readiness, when internal maturity, external circumstance, and divine intention converge into a single point of ignition. Kairos was never about the calendar reaching a sacred date. It was about the person reaching a sacred state. The difference between those two ideas is the difference between a patient lying on a table waiting for medicine to be injected and a body whose immune system has rebuilt itself to the point where healing activates from within. One is dependent, the other is operational. And the physician has always been more interested in making you operational than in keeping you dependent. Think about how your own body handles this at the cellular level. You carry stem cells, undifferentiated cells that hold the potential to become whatever the body needs: bone, muscle, tissue, nerve. But stem cells do not activate on a schedule. They do not look at the calendar and decide that Tuesday is the day to begin repair. They activate when they receive a signal, a chemical message from surrounding tissue that says damage has occurred here, renewal is needed now. No signal, no activation. The cells sit dormant, not dead, not damaged, just waiting for the input that tells them it is time to move. Your spiritual renewal system functions on the same architecture. The physician did not set a timer on your breakthrough. He set a trigger. And that trigger is not a date. It is a signal generated by the state of your inner environment, by the quality of what you depend on, by the alignment between what you carry and how you carry it. This reframes everything. You are not waiting for the appointed time to arrive from somewhere outside of you. You are generating the appointed time by what happens inside of you. Romans chapter 12 says it without ambiguity: be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Not be transformed by the arrival of a special season. Not be transformed when the prophet speaks your name. Be transformed by renewal. And renewal is a verb, an active process, something you participate in rather than something you receive while unconscious. The transformation does not fall on you. It forms in you first, and then reality rearranges itself around the new internal structure. This is not New Age manifestation dressed in scripture. This is the operating principle that runs beneath every recorded act of divine intervention in the text. Heaven moved when the person moved. Heaven spoke when the person positioned themselves to hear. Heaven opened when the person walked toward the door instead of sitting in the hallway asking if it was the right door. You have probably noticed this pattern in your own life without naming it. There were seasons when everything seemed to align, not because the stars shifted, but because something inside you shifted first. You made a decision, drew a boundary, released something heavy, and suddenly the fog cleared. Opportunities appeared that you could swear were not there the week before. People reached out as if prompted by something invisible. Those moments were not luck. They were not coincidence. They were kairos, real kairos, generated by an internal shift that sent a signal strong enough for the external world to respond to. The tragedy is that you experienced this and still went back to waiting for a date on someone else's calendar to give you permission to change. The permission was never external. The mechanism was never on the calendar. It was always and only in the signal you choose to send from the inside out. And the next question is the most practical one you will hear today. What exactly is generating that signal, and what has been jamming it? Before any healing protocol can begin, the first medical instruction is always the same: remove what is interfering with the body's ability to heal itself. You do not administer treatment into a system flooded with toxins and expect a clean response. The toxins intercept the medicine. They distort the signals. They create reactions that look like new problems, but are actually old contaminations wearing different symptoms. Every physician knows this. Detox before treatment. Clear the system before you rebuild it. And what is true in the body is true in the spirit. You cannot activate renewal while still feeding the very dependencies that shut it down. So before I hand you a single tool for rebuilding, we need to name the 3 substances you have been relying on that are quietly poisoning the system from within. Not sins, not failures. Dependencies, things that feel like sustenance but function as suppressants. The first is external validation used as fuel. You make a sound decision, one that required courage, discernment, and the kind of clarity that only comes from genuine inner alignment, and then you wait. Not for the results to materialize, but for someone to tell you that you were right. A nod from your supervisor, a compliment from a peer, a like on a post. Anything that confirms from the outside what your spirit already confirmed from the inside. And when that external signal does not arrive, something collapses. Not the decision was solid. What collapses is your confidence in it, because your confidence was never rooted in the decision itself. It was rooted in the applause. That is dependency. And every time the applause fails to show up, your internal system receives a message: shut down. We are not safe enough to operate independently. You complete a project at work. The quality is high, but your manager says nothing. A colleague walks past without comment. And instead of looking at the finished work and knowing it is good because the standard it meets is yours, you begin the spiral. Maybe it was not as strong as I thought. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I am not as capable as I believed. That is not humility. That is a renewable energy system being forced to run on someone else's battery. And batteries run out every single time. The second dependency is more subtle, and if you are watching this video, it has likely been your most consistent source of comfort for years. It is prophetic promise used as painkiller. Every time you feel the ache of stagnation, the pressure of unresolved financial strain, the weight of a dream that has not yet moved you, reach for a message that tells you breakthrough is coming, your season is shifting, doors are about to open, and something in your chest loosens. The anxiety fades, you feel hope, and you go to sleep. But here is what happened in that exchange. You traded urgency for comfort. The ache you felt was a diagnostic signal. It was your system telling you that something needs to be addressed, adjusted, acted upon. And instead of responding to that signal with movement, you silenced it with a promise that required nothing from you. Pain exists in the body for a reason. It tells the brain where attention is needed. When you take a painkiller, the pain fades, but the condition that caused it does not. It progresses in silence, unchecked, because the alarm was muted. That is what prophetic content becomes when consumed without corresponding action. It mutes the alarm, and the condition worsens while you sleep peacefully, believing help is on the way. Your finances did not improve because you heard that provision is coming. Your relationship did not heal because someone online declared restoration over your life. The only thing that changed was your tolerance for the problem, and increased tolerance for dysfunction is not a blessing. It is a symptom. The third dependency is busyness functioning as anesthetic. You are not addicted to rest. You are addicted to motion because motion gives you the sensation of progress without requiring you to answer the one question that actually matters. What am I building? You fill every hour, respond to every request, maintain every obligation, and at the end of the week you are exhausted, but cannot point to a single thing that moved you closer to the life your spirit knows you are supposed to be constructing. That exhaustion feels productive. It is not. It is Brownian motion, constant movement with zero displacement. The audit is simple, and it begins now. In the next 42 hours, I am not asking you to fix anything. I am asking you to watch yourself. Notice when you reach for validation that your own spirit already provided. Notice when you consume a promise instead of confronting a problem. Notice when you fill an hour with activity that builds nothing. Do not judge it. Do not correct it yet, just see it, because you cannot detox from what you have not diagnosed. And diagnosis requires honesty, not heroism. The removal comes next, but removal without awareness always relapses. First you see, then you are ready for what replaces the poison. Removing the toxins was the first protocol, but detox alone does not rebuild anything, it only clears the obstruction. A body emptied of poison, but given no rhythm to recover, will simply deteriorate in a different direction. What follows detox must be restoration of pattern, and pattern in every living system is governed by rhythm. Your body already knows this. Every self-renewing mechanism you carry, cellular repair, hormonal regulation, immune cycling, even memory consolidation, operates on a circadian rhythm. Not continuously, but in waves. Activity followed by rest. Expansion followed by consolidation. Output followed by absorption. Disrupt that rhythm through chronic sleep deprivation, through sustained stress without recovery, through forcing production when the system is signaling for pause, and the result is measurable, predictable, and devastating. Accelerated aging. Not because the system is broken, but because the rhythm that governs its renewal has been overridden. And what is true biologically is true spiritually. You have a spiritual rhythm, and you have broken it so thoroughly that you no longer remember what it felt like when it was intact. Here is what the broken rhythm looks like in practice. You oscillate between two states with almost nothing in between. State 1 is ignition, the surge you feel after a powerful sermon, an emotional worship session, a video that speaks directly to your situation. In that state, your faith feels unshakable. You make declarations. You feel invincible. You are certain that this time the momentum will hold. State 2 arrives roughly 72 hours later. The emotion fades. The certainty dissolves. The declarations feel hollow when you repeat them in an empty room without music underneath. And you crash, not dramatically, but quietly, like a phone battery draining in the background while the screen stays dark. Then you search for the next surge, the next video, the next conference, the next voice that can reignite what keeps going out. That is not a faith life. That is an addiction cycle with spiritual packaging. And the reason it ages you is because your system never reaches the sustained operational state where actual renewal occurs. You spike and crash, and in between those spikes, your internal architecture receives no consistent signal to rebuild. It only receives noise. 3 rhythms need to be restored, and none of them require dramatic lifestyle overhaul. The first is the input rhythm, what reaches your mind first each morning. Neuroscience has confirmed what scripture always implied. The initial information your brain processes after waking establishes the filter through which everything else that day gets interpreted. If the first input is a notification, an email, a headline, your nervous system sets itself to reaction mode. It spends the rest of the day filtering for threats, obligations, and urgencies. If the first input is silence, deliberate, undisturbed, even just 10 minutes of sitting with awareness before the world speaks, the filter shifts to reception mode. You begin processing the day through discernment rather than defense. I am not prescribing a 5 a.m. routine or a complicated morning ritual. I am prescribing 10 minutes of no screen and no external voice before you allow the day to enter. That is the first dose in your daily protocol. The second rhythm is output, and this is where the system starts sending activation signals again. Every day that you only react to what comes at you, emails, requests, problems, other people's agendas, your internal architecture logs it as survival mode. No initiative taken, no creative signal sent no evidence that the higher capacities are needed. But every day that you make one deliberate decision, even a small one, the system registers it differently. You are not surviving, you are building. A colleague sends a provocative message. The old rhythm responds in 4 minutes, loaded with emotion. The restored rhythm reads, it closes. It returns to it 2 hours later and decides whether a response is even necessary. Small action, massive internal signal. The third rhythm is rest, not entertainment, not distraction, but genuine cessation of production to allow the system to consolidate what it has processed. The Sabbath principle was never religious decoration. It was biological instruction from the physician himself. Even the Creator rested not from exhaustion, but from design, establishing the pattern that everything he built would follow. Activity without cyclical rest does not produce endurance. It produces erosion, and you have been eroding while calling it dedication. These 3 rhythms, input, output, rest, are the clock your system needs to sync with before any deeper repair can begin. But there is a condition running beneath the surface that even perfect rhythm cannot resolve on its own. An inflammation so chronic you have stopped noticing the heat. In clinical medicine, the condition that silently destroys more lives than almost any acute disease is chronic low-grade inflammation. Not the sharp, visible kind, not the swollen ankle or the infected wound that demands immediate attention. Those heal. The body recognizes them, mobilizes resources, resolves the issue, and moves on. What kills slowly is the other kind, the inflammation that never fully resolves, that hums beneath the surface at a volume too low to trigger alarm, but too constant to allow genuine recovery. The immune system stays activated, cortisol stays elevated, cellular repair gets perpetually deferred because the body believes it is still under threat. And the source of that belief is almost never a current danger. It is an old one, a wound that was never properly closed, a response that was never fully completed, a threat that disappeared from the environment but never left the nervous system. Your spirit carries the same condition, and it is consuming the energy that was meant to fuel your renewal. You are carrying open conflicts inside you right now that have never been resolved. Not the catastrophic wounds, those you have learned to identify and in many cases to name. What I am talking about is subtler, and for that reason, far more expensive. A sentence someone said to you 3 years ago that you told yourself you forgave, but your chest still tightens when their name appears on your phone. A decision you made that you know was wrong, but have never admitted was wrong, not to anyone else, to yourself. You are still constructing justifications for it in quiet moments, still defending a position that your own spirit abandoned long ago, but your pride refuses to release. A relationship that ended not explosively, but slowly through erosion, and you never allowed yourself the dignity of grief because the world expected you to be strong, to move on, to perform recovery before recovery had actually occurred. Each of these is an open file in your operating system, and every open file consumes processing power, not dramatically, not enough to crash the system, just enough to ensure that the system never runs at full capacity, just enough to keep your renewal mechanism perpetually underfunded because the energy it needs is being spent somewhere you stopped looking. The protocol here is not complex, but it requires a kind of courage that no external battle ever demanded, the courage to be honest with yourself in a room where no one is watching. Sit down. Write 3 things that are occupying space in your mind that you have not resolved. Not 30. 3. The ones that surface first when you lie still in the dark, those are the ones. They have been waiting for your attention longer than you realize, and your refusal to face them has not made them smaller. It has made them more expensive. Once you have named them, the next step is classification, and this is where precision matters more than emotion. For each item, ask one question: is this something that requires action or something that requires release? These are two entirely different forms of closure, and confusing them is the primary reason people stay stuck. Action means there is a conversation, to have a call, to make a decision, to execute. Release means the outcome already happened, cannot be reversed, and the only remaining task is to stop paying rent on a building you no longer occupy. Let me make this tangible. Someone owes you money from 2 years ago. If the amount justifies pursuit, contact them, set a deadline, close the loop with a concrete result. If the amount is smaller than the emotional tax you have been paying every week to stay angry about it, release it. Write it on a piece of paper. Acknowledge the loss as real and let the account close. Not because they deserved forgiveness, because you deserve the energy back. A wrong decision you made 18 months ago, you do not need to fix it publicly. You need to stop defending it internally. Say the words to yourself plainly: that was wrong. I see it now. I am not that decision. And feel the inflammation begin to drain the moment the honesty lands. Chosen one, you do not need to close all 3 in 42 hours. Close one. One open file resolved is one stream of energy returned to the renewal system. The physician does not require perfection before he begins. He requires a single honest step, and honest steps taken consistently produce the kind of healing that no prophecy spoken over your life could ever substitute for. The protocols are now in your hands. The toxins have been identified, the rhythm has been re-established, the inflammation is being addressed. What remains is the question that separates information from transformation. When the system comes back online, when clarity sharpens and energy returns and decisions regain their edge. What does that look like when it meets the world outside your chest? You have met someone like this before. They walked into a room and something shifted, not because they announced themselves, not because their title preceded them, not because they performed confidence with volume or posture. Something in the way they occupied space communicated a message that bypassed language entirely. The room reorganized around them without being asked. Conversations adjusted their tone. Decisions that had been circling for weeks suddenly found direction. And if you asked anyone afterward what exactly that person did, they would struggle to explain it, because it was not what they did, it was what they carried. And what they carried was the visible evidence of a system operating at capacity, an internal architecture so stable that the external world had no choice but to respond to its frequency. That is not charisma. Charisma can be manufactured, rehearsed, switched on for a meeting, and switched off in the parking lot. What I am describing cannot be faked because it is not a behavior. It is a condition, the condition of a spirit that has been detoxed, reset, and cleared of the inflammation that once consumed its operating power. And it is the condition you are approaching now. A body with a functioning immune system does not need to advertise its health. You see it without being told. The clarity in the eyes, the pace of recovery after illness, the energy that sustains without stimulants, the skin that reflects internal order without requiring external intervention. No announcement is necessary because the evidence speaks in a language that every other biological system instinctively recognizes. Your spirit operates the same way. When the renewal mechanism comes back online, when the dependencies have been removed, the rhythm restored, the chronic inflammation addressed, something begins radiating from you that you do not have to manufacture, maintain, or explain. It simply is. And it communicates authority not through declaration, but through presence. The kind of authority that does not ask for permission to exist in a room. The kind that does not shrink when challenged because it was not built on approval in the first place. The kind that makes other people trust your silence more than they trust another person's presentation. There are 3 markers that indicate this shift is already underway, and I want you to watch for them, not with anxiety, but with the clinical attention of someone observing their own recovery in real time. The first is decision speed, not recklessness speed. You begin noticing that choices which used to paralyze you for days now resolve themselves within hours. Not because you have become impulsive, but because your internal filter has regained its clarity. The noise that used to surround every option, what will they think? What if I am wrong? What if this is not the right timing? Quiets down. And in that quiet, the correct path becomes obvious in a way that feels almost too simple. Trust that simplicity. It is not naivety. It is the sound of a clean system processing without interference. The second marker is emotional deceleration. Your reactions slow down, not because you feel less, but because you see more. Where you once responded to provocation in seconds, you now observe the full landscape before moving. A critical email arrives. The old system would have fired a reply before the 3rd sentence was finished reading. The renewed system reads, closes, breathes, and returns when the response can be architectural rather than emotional. That pause, that 3-second gap between stimulus and response, is not passivity. It is the most concentrated expression of authority available to a human being. It says, I am not controlled by what enters my environment. I choose what I release into it. The third marker is unsolicited trust. People begin approaching you for counsel before major decisions, not because you advertised wisdom, but because the frequency you emit draws a specific kind of attention. They sense stability in you that they cannot locate in themselves, and they gravitate toward it the way a body gravitates toward warmth in cold weather. This is not manipulation. This is the natural consequence of a restored system operating at a frequency that others instinctively recognize as reliable. But here is the stewardship warning that must accompany every level of restored authority, and I will not soften it, because softening it would be negligence. Renewed authority attracts 2 categories of people simultaneously: those who genuinely seek guidance and those who seek access to what you carry for their own extraction. The distinction is critical, and it is your first real test. A person seeking guidance asks questions about themselves, their situation, their decision, their growth. A person seeking access asks questions about you, your plans, your resources, your connections, your next move. Learn to hear the difference. It is often contained not in the words, but in the direction of the curiosity. One faces inward, the other faces toward your supply. Anointed one, the authority returning to you was not restored so that it could be siphoned by someone who did not endure the process that produced it. It was restored so that you could steward it with the same discipline that rebuilt it. Guard it accordingly, not with paranoia, but with the precision of someone who now understands exactly what their energy costs and refuses to let it be spent without intention. The next layer of this shift moves into territory that most people of faith avoid entirely, and their avoidance is the single most expensive decision they have ever made without realizing it. There is a quiet crisis inside the faith community that almost no one addresses directly, because the moment you name it, the room gets uncomfortable. A significant number of deeply faithful, consistently prayerful, spiritually committed people are financially drowning, not because God abandoned them, not because their faith is insufficient, but because somewhere along the way they were taught to separate their spiritual life from their financial life, as if money operates in one kingdom and the spirit operates in another, and the two should never touch. That separation is a disease, and it has been destroying people who love God with their whole heart, while their whole bank account collapses beneath them. The physician never designed two separate systems. He designed one integrated architecture where spiritual alignment and material stewardship operate on the same circuit. When you disconnect them, the entire system malfunctions, not because God is punishing the disconnect, but because disconnected systems always malfunction. That is engineering, not theology. Your body maintains an immune system that does not prevent all illness, but prevents catastrophic vulnerability. It identifies threats early, mobilizes targeted responses, and eliminates what does not belong before it can establish a foothold. You need the same architecture around your finances, not a budget spreadsheet, not a prosperity confession, but a functional immune system that protects you from the specific financial decisions that destroy what you are building. That immune system has three components. The first is the ability to say no to an opportunity that looks good, but is not aligned, a business pitch that triggers excitement, but does not survive scrutiny, an investment that everyone around you is rushing into, but your spirit has not confirmed, a purchase that feels like reward, but functions as regression. The second is the discipline to distinguish between spending that builds and spending that sedates money directed toward education. Tools, health and positioning versus money spent to soothe emotional discomfort, to perform a lifestyle you have not yet built the foundation for, or to avoid the anxiety of sitting with unspent resources when the world keeps telling you that you deserve a treat. The third is radical honesty with numbers, not the numbers you hope for, not the numbers you project for next quarter, but the numbers that exist right now on your screen when you open the account and look without flinching. Here is the practical application, and it starts today. Open your banking app. Look at the last 30 days of transactions. Mark each one with a simple classification. Does this build something, or does it consume something? Education builds. A gym membership builds. A tool that increases your capacity builds. A subscription you forgot to cancel consumes. A meal ordered because cooking felt like too much effort consumes. An impulsive purchase that gave you 40 minutes of satisfaction and 3 days of regret consumes. The ratio between those two categories is your financial blood work. It tells you more about the health of your system than any income figure ever could, because income is not wealth. Income is supply, and supply without stewardship is just a faster leak. The second principle cuts deeper, and it is the one that will offend the theology of passivity we dismantled in earlier chapters. Provision follows positioning, not pleading. The physician does not respond to the volume of your request. He responds to the readiness of your structure. Two people pray for the same financial breakthrough. One prays and then waits faithfully, sincerely, but passively. The other prays and then spends 1 hour every evening learning the field they want to enter, building relationships with people who have already walked the road, refining a plan until it can withstand scrutiny. When the opportunity passes through, and it will recognize the second person, because the second person built the signal that opportunity responds to. That is not favoritism. That is the mechanism by which divine provision has always operated, through prepared vessels, not empty hands held open with nothing behind them, but hope. Chosen one. Your financial immune system does not need a miracle injection. It needs the same thing your spiritual system needed: detox rhythm and the closure of leaks you have been tolerating because addressing them felt less spiritual than praying about them. The next layer addresses what happens when both the inner authority and the financial architecture are functional. And the question becomes not how do I survive, but where do I stand so that what I have built actually reaches the world it was designed to serve. In post-surgical recovery, the most dangerous phase is not the operation itself. It is the period immediately after, when the patient feels better, regains mobility, and begins to believe the hard part is over. That belief is where the majority of recovery failures originate. The patient returns to old habits too quickly, overloads the healing structure before it has solidified, or abandons the rehabilitation protocol because the absence of pain feels like the presence of completion. More patients lose what a successful surgery gave them during recovery than during the procedure itself, not because the surgery failed, but because they confused feeling better with being rebuilt. Your spiritual renewal carries the same vulnerability. The protocols you have engaged, the detox, the rhythm, reset, the closure of chronic inflammation, have already begun producing results you can feel. Clarity is returning. Decision speed is sharpening. Emotional stability is firming up. And that progress, if you are not careful, will become the very thing that undoes itself. Because progress without positioning is a structure built in the middle of an open field with no address, real, solid, well-constructed, and completely unreachable by the opportunities it was designed to receive. 3 mistakes will cost you everything you have rebuilt if you do not see them before they arrive. The first is premature exposure. Renewal generates a kind of energy that wants to be shared. You feel different, you see differently, and the temptation to announce that shift to everyone around you is almost irresistible. But not every person in your life is safe to receive information about your transformation. Some people need you to remain the old version because the old version served a function in their ecosystem. You carried their emotional weight. You absorbed their dysfunction without complaint. You stayed small enough to make their mediocrity feel comfortable. When you change, the role you played in their life changes, and they will consciously or not apply pressure to pull you back into the shape they recognize. A colleague notices you setting new boundaries at work and says you have changed lately, with a tone that frames change as accusation rather than observation. That sentence is not concern. It is the immune response of an old system rejecting a foreign element. You do not need to explain the change. You do not need to defend it. You need to continue it quietly, consistently, without apology, and let the results speak in a language that requires no translation. The second mistake is building goals that belong to the person you were before the renewal. You have been upgraded, but your targets have not. You are still measuring yourself against peers you were level with 3 years ago, peers whose ceiling you have already passed without realizing it. This is why some people achieve the exact dream they spent years chasing and feel nothing when it arrives. The dream was designed by the old architecture. The new architecture requires a different scale of ambition, not bigger in the way the world measures bigger, but deeper in the way the physician measures depth. The old you set goals around survival, earn this amount, reach this title, achieve this milestone. The renewed you sets goals around construction. What do I build that outlasts me? Who do I serve with what I have been given? What structure do I leave behind that others can stand on after I am gone? The third mistake is treating renewal as an event rather than a discipline. You do not brush your teeth once and consider the matter permanently resolved. You do not eat one nutritious meal and declare your health restored for life. The 3 protocols, detox, rhythm, anti-inflammation, are not assignments to complete and file away. They are the new operating system. Every day you run them, the renewal deepens. Every day you skip them, the old patterns begin reinstalling themselves with a patience that should concern you because they have been running your system far longer than the new code has. Maintenance is not glamorous. It does not produce content-worthy breakthroughs or testimony-ready moments. It produces something far more valuable: structural integrity that holds when pressure arrives, when opportunity scales beyond what you expected, when the weight of what the physician entrusts to you exceeds what the old version could have carried without fracturing. Anointed One positioning is the final act of the protocol, not because it is the last thing you do, but because it is the thing that determines whether everything you rebuilt remains a private renovation or becomes a visible, functional, inhabited structure that the world can walk through and recognize as proof that renewal is not theory. It is architecture. And architecture, when properly positioned, does not need to advertise. It simply stands, and everything that belongs to it finds its way to the door. You have walked through the full protocol now. Detox, the removal of substitute fuels that suppressed your system while pretending to sustain it. Reset, the restoration of rhythms that govern every self-renewing mechanism you carry. Anti-inflammatory closure, the confrontation of unresolved conflicts that were silently consuming the energy designated for your rebuilding. Recovery, positioning, the discipline of protecting what was rebuilt from the habits, environments, and relationships that would dismantle it before it solidifies. This was never magic. This was never a prophecy delivered from a stage to a passive audience waiting for heaven to do what only they could initiate. This was medicine, sacred, precise, built on principles as old as the first body the physician ever formed from dust and breath. And like all real medicine, it does not work because you believe in it. It works because you take it. Let me say plainly what this entire message has been building toward, because it needs to land without cushion. You do not need a date circled on a calendar to give you permission to change. You do not need a stranger on the internet to declare that this is your season before you allow yourself to act on what your spirit has been telling you for months. The appointed hour, the real one, not the marketed version, was never a position on a timeline. It was a position inside you. It is the moment when your internal state reaches the threshold where renewal activates, not because the calendar says so, but because the signal you are sending from within has become too strong for the external world to ignore. That moment is not scheduled. It is generated by choices made in rooms where no one watches. Generated by disciplines maintained on mornings when motivation is absent and only architecture remains. Generated by the specific, measurable, unglamorous decision to stop consuming promises and start executing protocols. Isaiah chapter 40 contains a sentence that has been quoted so many times it has nearly lost its meaning. So I want to restore it here with the precision it deserves. Those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. The word translated as wait in English is the Hebrew word kava. And kava does not mean to sit in stillness hoping for intervention. It means to bind together the way fibers are twisted into rope to multiply their strength beyond what any single strand could hold. To wait upon the Lord in the original language is to braid your daily life into His design so tightly that the two become structurally inseparable. It is active, It is physical. It is the furthest thing from passivity that the language could express. And the result, renewed strength mounting up, running without weariness, is not a reward for patience. It is the natural output of a life that has been integrated with its source at the operational level. There was a season when I believed my moment would arrive if I waited long enough, trusted hard enough, endured with enough grace. I waited, and I aged in the waiting, not in years, but in sharpness, in vision, in the fire that once made my decisions fast and my faith unreasonable in the best sense of the word. The shift did not come on a special day. It came on the day I stopped waiting for a special day. The day I opened my eyes and understood that the physician had never told me to wait. He told me to operate and to trust that his hand would guide the scalpel while mine held it steady. That was the day renewal began. Not with thunder, not with open gates and supernatural provision falling from the atmosphere. With a decision made in a quiet room on an ordinary morning that rearranged everything that came after it. Chosen one, 42 hours. Not because the number is sacred, because it is yours starting now. One toxin identified, one rhythm restored, one inflammation closed. Begin there, not from perfection, from ignition. And if this protocol reached the exact place inside you where the ache has been sitting unnamed, if it touched the one wound that no prophecy ever addressed, because prophecies do not perform surgery, only physicians do, then mark this moment. Not for me, for the system inside you that just received its first honest signal in longer than you want to admit. Write one line below. Anything your spirit needs to declare to close the old file and open the new one. And if there is someone in your life aging in silence for the same reasons, you will send them this. Not because a video can save anyone, but because sometimes a person needs to hear that there is a protocol, not just a promise, and that the hand steady enough to heal them has been inside their own chest the entire time.